Welcome to Soft Spoken Mysteries. If you're enjoying these deep dives into history's most fascinating achievements, please take a moment to like this episode and follow the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you these stories of human ingenuity every single day. Now let's step back nearly 2,000 years and discover how ancient engineers accomplished something that still baffles modern science. Stand in the center of the Pantheon in Rome. Look up. Above your head floats a massive concrete dome that spans 142 feet across. No steel beams support it. No reinforcement holds it together. Just ancient Roman concrete and a gaping hole in the middle that opens straight to the sky. This dome has been standing for nearly 2,000 years. Modern engineers look at this structure and scratch their heads. By every contemporary standard, this dome should not exist. The concrete used to build it should have crumbled centuries ago. Our most sophisticated concrete structures begin showing serious cracks after 50 years. The average concrete highway bridge in America needs major repairs within the same time frame. Yet here stands the Pantheon, defying time itself, its concrete as solid today as the day Roman workers laid it. In 1900, divers exploring a shipwreck off the coast of Greece discovered something impossible among the ancient cargo. But that's a different story. What they found wasn't concrete. But what if I told you that scattered across the Mediterranean, buried beneath centuries of waves and weather, lie structures that reveal an even more astonishing secret? Roman concrete doesn't just survive, it actually gets stronger over time. How did they do it? For decades, scientists have been trying to answer that question. They've ground ancient concrete into powder, examined it under electron microscopes, bombarded it with X-rays, and mapped its molecular structure. They've studied samples from the Pantheon, from ancient harbours, from bridges and aqueducts. And in 2023, researchers at MIT finally cracked the code. They discovered that Roman engineers had figured out something we're only now beginning to understand. They created a building material that could heal its own cracks. This is not ancient mystery wrapped in supernatural claims. This is engineering genius preserved in stone and time. This is the story of how human beings, without computers or advanced tools, solved a problem that still challenges us today. This is the story of Roman concrete, and how after nearly 2,000 years, we're finally learning to read the book of knowledge they left behind. The Roman Empire stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. Everywhere they conquered, they built. Roads that connected distant provinces, aqueducts that brought fresh water to cities, harbours that enabled trade across the Mediterranean, bridges that spanned rivers and valleys. And at the heart of all this construction was a material that would change architecture forever. Before concrete, builders worked primarily with stone. Every structure required massive blocks, carefully cut and precisely fitted. Construction moved slowly. The logistics were staggering. But around 200 BC, Roman engineers began experimenting with a new approach. They discovered that mixing volcanic ash with lime and water created a paste that hardened into stone. Add chunks of rock to this paste, and you had a material that could be poured into any shape. A material that grew stronger as it set. A material that opened up architectural possibilities no one had imagined before. The Romans called it opus caementitium. We call it Roman concrete, and within a century, it had transformed what was possible to build. In 27 BC, Marcus Agrippa built the first Pantheon in Rome. It burned down in 80 AD. Emperor Domitian rebuilt it. Lightning struck it in 110 AD, and it burned down again. 7 years later, Emperor Hadrian decided to rebuild it one more time. But this time, he had an ambitious vision. He wanted a dome that would dwarf anything the world had ever seen. A dome that would demonstrate the power and sophistication of Rome itself. The dome Hadrian's engineers designed measured 43.3 meters across. To put that in perspective, it's the same width as a modern 16-story building. The height from the floor to the oculus, the opening at the top, is exactly the same as the diameter. If you could roll the dome down and set it on the floor as a complete sphere, it would fit perfectly inside the building, with the top of the sphere just touching the floor. This geometric perfection was not accidental. It was carefully calculated. But here's what makes it truly astounding. The entire dome is made of unreinforced concrete. No steel bars run through it. No internal framework supports it. No external buttresses prop it up. It is simply concrete, shaped into a perfect hemisphere, weighing 4,535 tons, suspended in air by nothing but its own engineering. Modern building codes would never permit such a structure. No engineer today would dare attempt it. The risk would be too great, the liability too severe. Yet there it stands nearly 2,000 years later, still the largest unreinforced concrete dome ever built. Modern attempts to match it have all failed or required additional support. Construction of the dome took approximately 7 years. Roman workers started with the massive circular walls that would support the dome's weight. These walls are 20 feet thick at the base. Then they built wooden scaffolding and frameworks to support the wet concrete as it set. Working in horizontal layers, they poured the concrete mix and waited for each layer to cure before adding the next. But as they built upward, they employed a crucial technique. They changed the concrete mix itself. At the base of the dome, where the weight and stress would be greatest, they used dense travertine rock as the aggregate mixed into the concrete. As they moved higher, they switched to lighter materials, terracotta tiles, then tuff, a porous volcanic rock. At the very top, they used pumice, the lightest volcanic rock available. The thickness of the dome also decreases as it rises. At the base, it's 21 feet thick. At the top, around the oculus, it's only 4 feet thick. This graduated approach reduced weight where the structure was most vulnerable while maintaining strength where it was most needed. Every decision, every calculation, every choice of material demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of structural engineering. And at the very top, they left the oculus open. This hole, 27 feet across, seems counterintuitive. Why weaken the structure at its highest point? But the oculus serves multiple purposes. It dramatically reduces the weight at the dome's apex, exactly where the structure would be most vulnerable to collapse. It provides ventilation, allowing air to circulate and preventing moisture buildup. And it creates a connection to the sky, to the gods, to the cosmos itself. Rain falls through the oculus. You might think this would be a problem, but the floor beneath is slightly domed and contains drainage holes. Water that enters through the top flows to the edges and drains away. In practice, rain seldom causes issues inside. The draft created by the oculus often prevents rain from falling straight down, and what does enter quickly disappears through the ancient drainage system that still functions perfectly after 2 millennia. The Pantheon has survived nearly 2,000 years of earthquakes. It has weathered storms, floods, and the fall of the empire that built it. It has endured centuries of neglect and repurposing. In 609 AD, it was converted to a Christian church, which ironically helped preserve it. While other Roman buildings were stripped for their materials, the Pantheon remained protected and maintained. Today, it welcomes millions of visitors every year. You can walk inside, just as Romans did 2,000 years ago. You can stand on the same marble floor, look up at the same coffered ceiling, see sunlight streaming through the same oculus. The structure has not been significantly modified. It has not required major repairs. It simply stands, doing what it was designed to do, demonstrating an achievement that modern engineering still struggles to match. But the Pantheon is not unique. Across the former Roman Empire, concrete structures have survived in ways that puzzle modern engineers. The Pont du Gard aqueduct in France, built in the 1st century AD, still stands without any modern restoration. Roman harbours, submerged under seawater for 2,000 years, show minimal deterioration. Bridge piers that have endured centuries of river floods remain structurally sound. Walls, roads and buildings constructed with Roman concrete have outlasted countless structures built with modern materials. This longevity is not just impressive, it's economically significant. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that the United States needs to spend approximately $4.5 trillion to repair and replace deteriorating infrastructure. Across the world, concrete structures built as recently as the 1970s are already crumbling, requiring billions in repairs. Modern concrete highways develop cracks within years. Bridges need reinforcement within decades. Buildings require renovation within a century at most. Yet Roman concrete structures, exposed to harsher conditions without any modern maintenance, have survived 20 times longer. The difference is not marginal, it's revolutionary. And for decades, scientists have been trying to figure out why. The investigation into Roman concrete's secrets spans multiple continents and decades of research. It involves chemists, geologists, archaeologists, engineers, and materials scientists. It requires specialized equipment capable of examining the molecular structure of 2,000-year-old material. It demands careful analysis of ancient texts, archaeological sites, and surviving structures. The most comprehensive studies have focused on samples from specific locations. The Pantheon in Rome provides access to concrete that has never been submerged or exposed to seawater. Archaeological sites in Italy, particularly Priverno and Pompeii, offer samples from different time periods and construction contexts. Marine structures, like the harbour at Portus Cosanus and various piers along the Mediterranean coast, allow scientists to study concrete that has spent centuries underwater. In the early 2000s, researcher Marie Jackson from the University of Utah began examining samples from Roman maritime structures. She was particularly interested in harbour installations that had been continuously battered by waves for 2,000 years. Using scanning electron microscopy, X-ray diffraction, and Raman spectroscopy, she and her team mapped the crystalline structure of the ancient concrete at extremely high resolution. What they found was remarkable. Roman maritime concrete contains a rare mineral called aluminum tobermarite. This mineral has long plate-like crystals that allow the material to bend slightly under stress rather than crack. Modern concrete does not contain this mineral. Modern concrete is designed to be inert, unchanging, stable. Roman concrete, by contrast, is chemically active. It interacts with its environment, and in that interaction lies its strength. When seawater permeates through Roman concrete, it triggers a chemical reaction. The volcanic ash in the concrete reacts with the salt water to form aluminum tobermarite and another mineral called philipsite. These crystals grow within the concrete matrix, filling pores and strengthening the material. The structure doesn't just survive exposure to seawater, it actually becomes stronger because of it. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century AD, observed this phenomenon without understanding its chemistry. He wrote that Roman concrete in seawater became a single stone mass, impregnable to the waves and every day stronger. He was describing a process that would take scientists 2,000 years to fully explain. But maritime concrete is only part of the story. The Pantheon wasn't built in seawater. Its dome has stood in open air, exposed to rain and pollution and temperature changes. What gives that concrete its incredible durability? The answer to that question remained elusive until very recently. For years, researchers assumed that the key to Roman concrete's strength lay primarily in one ingredient: pozzolanic material, specifically volcanic ash from the area around Pozzuoli near Naples. This ash, called pozzolana in honour of its source, was shipped across the entire Roman Empire for use in construction. Ancient texts describe it as essential for quality concrete. The ash is rich in silica and alumina, compounds that react with lime and water to form strong, durable bonds. Modern concrete uses a different approach. It relies on Portland cement, developed in the 19th century. Portland cement is made by heating limestone and clay in giant kilns at temperatures around 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. This process creates a material called clinker, which is then ground into a fine powder. When mixed with water, Portland cement hardens quickly and achieves high strength relatively fast. It's predictable, standardized, and well suited for modern construction needs. But Portland cement has significant drawbacks. Producing it requires enormous energy input due to the high temperatures needed. The cement industry is responsible for approximately 8% of global carbon dioxide emissions. That's more than the entire aviation industry. And despite its initial strength, Portland cement concrete begins deteriorating relatively quickly. Exposure to water, freeze-thaw cycles, salt water, and chemical attacks all degrade its structure. Most modern concrete structures have an expected lifespan of 50 to 100 years, depending on their environment. Roman concrete takes a fundamentally different approach. It relies on pozzolanic reactions that occur at ambient temperatures. The volcanic ash reacts with lime and water over time, gradually building strength. This process requires less energy to initiate and produces less carbon dioxide. But for centuries, scientists assumed that pozzolana was the entire secret. They thought if we could just replicate the Roman mix of ash and lime, we could recreate their concrete. That assumption was challenged by a peculiar observation. When scientists examined samples of Roman concrete under microscopes, they noticed something odd. Scattered throughout the material were small white chunks, millimeter-scale bits of lime. These chunks, called lime clasts, appeared to be poorly mixed. They looked like impurities, evidence of sloppy construction or low-quality materials. Most researchers dismissed them as unimportant, but Admir Masick, a professor of civil and environmental engineering at MIT, wasn't satisfied with that explanation. He kept looking at these lime clasts and wondering, if the Romans put so much effort into creating an outstanding construction material, if they had optimized their recipes over centuries, why would they consistently produce concrete with what appeared to be poorly mixed lime? Why would these clasts appear in every sample, from every time period, from every location? There had to be more to the story. In 2023, Masick and his research team published findings that would fundamentally change our understanding of Roman concrete. Working with colleagues from Harvard University and laboratories in Italy and Switzerland, they carefully examined 2,000-year-old samples from the archaeological site of Priverno in Italy. They subjected these samples to advanced imaging techniques, large area scanning electron microscopy, energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, powder X-ray diffraction, and confocal Raman imaging. What they discovered was that these lime clasts were not evidence of poor quality. They were, in fact, the secret to Roman concrete's incredible durability, and their presence revealed a completely different production method than anyone had suspected. The standard understanding of Roman concrete, based on the writings of Vitruvius, suggested that Romans used slaked lime. Slaked lime is created by adding water to quicklime, a process called slaking. This creates a paste that can be mixed with volcanic ash. It's a relatively cool, controlled process that produces a uniform mixture. But the lime clasts that Masick's team examined showed a completely different chemical signature. These clasts could only have formed through a process called hot mixing. In hot mixing, you combine quicklime, volcanic ash, and water together at once. The quicklime reacts violently with water, generating intense heat. Temperatures inside the mixing vessel can reach several hundred degrees. The mixture bubbles and steams. It's chaotic, energetic, and produces those distinctive lime clasts as fragments of quicklime survive the initial reaction. This discovery solved a mystery that had puzzled researchers for years. How could Roman concrete be so much stronger and more durable than modern concrete made with similar ingredients? The answer lay not just in what they used, but in how they mixed it. Hot mixing provides three crucial advantages. First, the high temperatures allow chemical reactions that cannot occur at ambient temperatures. These reactions create mineral compounds that would not form in slaked-lime concrete. The resulting material has different properties, different strengths, different behavior under stress. Second, the rapid setting time enabled by hot mixing meant Roman builders could work much faster. Structures could be built in less time, reducing labor costs and construction periods. This speed was one reason Rome could build on such a massive scale. They weren't waiting days or weeks for concrete to cure before adding the next layer. They could work continuously, maintaining momentum in their construction projects. But the third advantage is the most remarkable. Those lime clasts, those white chunks that looked like impurities, give Roman concrete the ability to heal itself. Here's how it works. As concrete ages, microscopic cracks inevitably form. Temperature changes cause expansion and contraction. Structural stress creates tiny fissures. Water penetration begins the process of deterioration. In modern concrete, these cracks are the beginning of the end. Once water gets into a crack, it accelerates the breakdown of the material. The crack grows wider, more water enters, the deterioration cascades. Eventually, the concrete fails. But in Roman concrete, something different happens. When cracks form, they preferentially travel through the lime clasts. This occurs because the lime clasts have a higher surface area than other particles in the concrete matrix. They're more brittle, more prone to fracturing. So when stress creates a crack, that crack tends to propagate through the lime clasts rather than through the surrounding material. Now, when water enters these cracks, it encounters the lime clasts. And here's where the chemistry becomes beautiful. The lime in these clasts is highly reactive. When water touches it, the lime dissolves into the water, creating a calcium-rich solution. This solution flows into the crack, filling it. Then, as the water evaporates or reacts with carbon dioxide in the air, the dissolved calcium precipitates out. It crystallizes as calcium carbonate, the same material as limestone. This calcium carbonate bonds to the edges of the crack, effectively gluing it back together. The crack heals itself. The concrete doesn't just survive, it repairs its own damage. This self-healing mechanism explains why Roman concrete structures have survived so long despite exposure to harsh conditions. Every time a small crack formed, the material automatically sealed it before it could grow into a major structural problem. The concrete responded to damage by fixing itself over and over for centuries. To prove this mechanism, Massic's team created their own samples of hot mixed concrete using both ancient style and modern formulations. They deliberately cracked these samples, then ran water through the cracks. Within 2 weeks, the cracks in the hot mixed concrete had completely healed. Water could no longer flow through them. The material had sealed itself. An identical sample made without quicklime, using traditional slaked lime, never healed. The water continued flowing through that sample indefinitely. This was not theoretical chemistry. This was demonstrable, repeatable, physical proof that hot mixing creates self-healing concrete. The ancient Romans had figured out something we're only now beginning to understand. They had created a material that could repair itself over thousands of years. A reactive, dynamic building material that responded to its environment. But questions remained. The Pompeii excavation would provide even more answers. In 2024, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary beneath the volcanic ash that buried Pompeii in 79 AD. They found a construction site, frozen in time at the exact moment of the eruption. This wasn't ruins. This wasn't a finished building being preserved. This was an active work site, with materials neatly organized and ready for use. It was like stepping into a moment 2,000 years ago and finding everything exactly as Roman workers had left it. Among the organized piles of materials, researchers found the ingredients for Roman concrete. There were piles of volcanic ash. There were chunks of volcanic rock to be used as aggregate. And crucially, there were piles of quicklime mixed with ash, ready to be combined with water. This pre-mixed dry material provided direct physical evidence that confirmed Massic's hot mixing theory. The Romans were indeed mixing quicklime directly with the dry ingredients before adding water. But there was a problem. The hot mixing technique that Massic had identified didn't match what Vitruvius had written in his famous architectural treatise, De Architectura, written around 25 BC. Vitruvius, whose writings are the most complete surviving documents on Roman architecture and construction, described a different method. He wrote that builders should first add water to lime to create a paste, then mix that paste with volcanic ash. That's the slaked lime method, not hot mixing. This discrepancy had troubled researchers. Was Vitruvius wrong? Was his text corrupted or misunderstood over centuries of copying? Or were there multiple methods used at different times? The Pompeii site offered new tools to investigate this question. The perfectly preserved construction materials allowed for isotope analysis that could track chemical reactions over time. Kristin Bergman, an associate professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at MIT, developed techniques to differentiate between lime that had been slaked and lime that had been hot mixed. By examining stable isotopes, the team could follow the carbonation reactions and determine which process had been used. The results revealed something fascinating. The Romans did prepare their binding material exactly as Massic had proposed. They took calcined limestone, which is quicklime, ground it to a specific size, mixed it dry with volcanic ash, and only then added water to create the cementing matrix. This hot mixing process was the standard method, used consistently across the empire, from Britain to Syria. So why did Vitruvius describe something different? The most likely explanation is that De Architectura was not a tightly polished technical manual in the modern sense. It was a collection of notes and insights, compiled over time, probably by multiple editors and copyists. Ancient texts went through many hands before reaching the versions we have today. It's possible that Vitruvius described an older method, or a simplified version for non-experts, or that later copyists altered his original instructions. We may never know for certain, but the physical evidence from Pompeii and from structures across the empire is clear. Hot mixing was the Roman method. The Pompeii site revealed another crucial detail. When researchers examined the volcanic materials in the concrete, particularly pumice particles, they found something remarkable. These pumice particles weren't just sitting inert in the concrete. They were chemically reacting with the pore solution over time. The reactions created new mineral deposits that filled voids and strengthened the material. The concrete was actively improving itself, decade after decade, century after century. This dynamic nature of Roman concrete stands in stark contrast to modern Portland cement. Modern concrete is designed to be chemically stable. Once it sets and cures, we want it to remain essentially unchanged. Any chemical activity is seen as deterioration, but the Romans created a material that thrived on chemical exchange with its environment. Water wasn't an enemy. It was a catalyst for healing and strengthening. The porous structure of the volcanic ash allowed solutions to move through the concrete, triggering beneficial reactions. This philosophy represents a fundamentally different approach to materials engineering. We build with the assumption that materials should be inert. The Romans built with materials designed to be reactive and responsive. Their concrete got better with age. Ours deteriorates from day one. The environmental implications of these discoveries are staggering. Concrete production is one of the largest contributors to global carbon dioxide emissions. The cement industry alone accounts for about 8% of all human-caused CO2 emissions. That's more than 3 times the emissions from aviation. As developing nations build more infrastructure, concrete use is projected to increase dramatically over the next several decades. If we continue using current Portland cement methods, the environmental impact will be catastrophic. But Roman-inspired concrete offers a different path. The hot mixing process requires lower temperatures than Portland cement production. While Portland cement kilns operate at 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit, Roman concrete can be produced at much lower temperatures. The volcanic ash provides the necessary chemical properties without the need for extreme heat. This alone could dramatically reduce the energy required for cement production. More importantly, the extended lifespan of Roman-style concrete could reduce the total amount of concrete needed over time. If structures last 500 years instead of 50, we need to build and rebuild far less frequently. If we could add even 50 or 100 years to concrete's typical lifespan, the cumulative savings in materials, labour, energy, and emissions would be enormous. We would require less demolition, less maintenance, and less raw material extraction in the long run. Admir Masick has started a company called DMAT to commercialize these discoveries. The goal is not to completely replicate Roman concrete. We don't have access to the exact volcanic materials the Romans used, and we have different construction needs. Modern buildings face different loads and stresses than Roman structures. We need concrete that can be reinforced with steel for tall buildings and complex designs. We need consistent, predictable properties that meet modern building codes, but we can translate key principles from Roman concrete into modern construction practices. We can incorporate self-healing mechanisms. We can use more reactive materials that benefit from environmental exposure rather than deteriorating from it. We can design concrete that improves with age instead of weakening. We can significantly extend the functional lifespan of our infrastructure while reducing its environmental impact. Current research is exploring several approaches. Some teams are experimenting with coal fly ash, a byproduct of coal combustion, which has similar chemical properties to volcanic ash. Others are developing alternative sources of reactive minerals. Still others are working on incorporating self-healing mechanisms into concrete that uses Portland cement, creating hybrid materials that combine the best of ancient and modern approaches. The US Army Corps of Engineers has been testing Roman-inspired concrete formulations for critical infrastructure applications. They're particularly interested in maritime structures, like dams, locks, and coastal defences, where traditional concrete typically fails prematurely. The self-healing properties and seawater resistance of Roman concrete make it ideal for these applications. Even if it costs more initially, the extended lifespan and reduced maintenance requirements make it economically attractive for long-term projects. Cities are beginning to explore Roman-inspired concrete for bridges, roads, and public buildings. The calculations are compelling. A bridge that lasts 200 years instead of 50 requires less frequent replacement. That means less traffic disruption, lower long-term costs, and significantly reduced environmental impact. For monuments and civic buildings meant to stand for generations, Roman-style concrete offers a way to actually achieve that permanence. The story of Roman concrete forces us to reconsider our assumptions about technological progress. We often assume that newer is better, that modern science has surpassed everything that came before. But here we have an ancient technology that outperforms our contemporary solution by orders of magnitude. Structures built 2,000 years ago outlast buildings constructed in the last century. Ancient engineers solved problems we're still struggling with. This doesn't mean the Romans were more advanced than we are. They had different constraints, different needs, different resources. They built for permanence because they had the time and labour. They used local materials because long-distance transport was expensive. They developed concrete that worked with their climate, their geography, their architectural styles. Their solutions fit their context. But their achievements remind us that innovation isn't always linear. Knowledge can be lost, techniques can be forgotten, sometimes the path forward requires looking back, examining what worked before, understanding why it worked, and adapting those principles to our current needs. The Romans left us a book written in stone and mineral. For 2,000 years we've been walking past it, admiring it, but not fully reading it. Now finally, we're learning to translate what they wrote. The Pantheon stands as a monument not just to Roman architectural ambition, but to the value of materials engineering. Every time you stand beneath that dome, you're standing beneath a lesson in chemistry, physics, and patience. The Romans understood that great structures require great materials. They didn't just build for today or tomorrow, they built for centuries. They created concrete that would outlast their empire, their language, their gods. The oculus above lets in rain, as it has for 2,000 years. The rain falls and the ancient drainage system carries it away. The marble floor, original to the building, shows the wear of countless feet over countless years. The coffered ceiling, each coffer carefully designed to reduce weight without sacrificing beauty, demonstrates the intersection of art and engineering. And the concrete itself, invisible beneath its marble cladding on the interior, exposed to view on the exterior, continues doing exactly what it was designed to do 2 millennia ago. This is what impresses me most about Roman concrete. Not just that it has survived, but how it has survived. Through the fall of Rome, through barbarian invasions, through medieval darkness, through the Renaissance and Enlightenment and Industrial Revolution, through wars and earthquakes and floods, through centuries when no one understood how it was made or why it worked. The material just kept performing, kept standing, kept demonstrating its maker's genius to every generation that came after. Modern visitors to the Pantheon see a tourist attraction. Archaeologists see a historical artifact. But engineers see something else. They see a challenge. They see a standard to aspire to. They see proof that it's possible to build things that last not decades but millennia. That it's possible to create materials that improve with age rather than deteriorate. That sustainability isn't a modern concept, but an ancient achievement we've lost and must regain. When Michelangelo first saw the Pantheon in the early 1500s, he proclaimed it of angelic and not human design. He was wrong, of course. It is absolutely human design. That's what makes it so inspiring. Humans figured this out. Humans, with the tools and knowledge available 2,000 years ago, solved problems we're only now beginning to understand. They didn't have computers to calculate load distributions. They didn't have electron microscopes to examine molecular structures. They didn't have the periodic table or modern chemistry. They had observation, experimentation, and accumulated wisdom passed from generation to generation. They heated limestone and discovered quicklime. They noticed that volcanic ash, when mixed with lime and water, created something stronger than mud or clay. They experimented with different ratios, different mixing methods, different applications. They observed what worked and what failed. They shared knowledge across the empire. They refined their techniques over centuries. And eventually, they created concrete that could build an empire. That empirical approach, that patient accumulation of knowledge, that willingness to learn from what works rather than just what theory predicts. These are timeless principles of engineering. The Romans couldn't explain the chemistry of their concrete in modern terms. They didn't know about calcium silicate hydrates or aluminum tobermorite or pozzolanic reactions, but they understood the practical results. They knew what worked, and they built accordingly. Today, with all our advanced understanding, we're trying to recapture that practical success. We can explain exactly why Roman concrete heals itself. We can map every chemical reaction, track every mineral formation, model the material properties with incredible precision. But translating that understanding into practical, scalable, economically viable modern concrete that matches Roman durability, that's still challenging us. The research continues. Teams around the world are examining samples, running tests, creating experimental mixes. They're studying Roman concrete from different regions and time periods, looking for variations in technique and materials. They're analysing ancient quarries to understand the exact composition of the volcanic ash. They're recreating Roman kilns to see how quicklime was produced. They're testing how self-healing concrete performs under different environmental conditions. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle. Each experiment brings us closer to fully understanding what the Romans achieved. And each successful test of Roman-inspired concrete in modern applications demonstrates that this ancient knowledge has practical value for our future. The stakes are high. Global infrastructure is aging rapidly. In the United States alone, bridges, roads, dams, and buildings built in the mid-20th century are reaching the end of their design lives. Other countries face similar challenges. China has built massive amounts of infrastructure in recent decades, much of it using standard Portland cement concrete. That infrastructure will eventually need replacement. India and Africa are rapidly developing, building new cities and transportation networks. The concrete demands of the 21st century are staggering. If we build all this infrastructure using current methods, the environmental impact will be catastrophic. The carbon emissions from cement production alone could prevent us from meeting climate goals. The resource extraction, the energy consumption, the waste generation, all of it compounds the environmental challenge. And then, in 50 to 100 years, all that infrastructure will need to be rebuilt, creating another wave of environmental impact. But if we can incorporate Roman principles into modern concrete, if we can extend the lifespan of structures from decades to centuries, if we can create self-healing materials that improve rather than deteriorate, we change the equation entirely. We reduce the total amount of concrete needed over time. We lower the carbon footprint of construction. We create infrastructure that serves not just our generation, but our grandchildren's generation. This is the promise hidden in 2,000-year-old concrete, not just historical curiosity, but practical solutions to contemporary problems. Not just admiration for ancient achievement, but a roadmap for future innovation. The Romans couldn't have imagined the challenges we face today. Climate change, global population growth, rapid urbanization. These weren't concepts in their world, but the materials and methods they developed, the philosophy of building for permanence, the creation of responsive, dynamic building materials. These insights transcend their specific historical context. When you look at the Pantheon, you're not just looking at old architecture, you're looking at a different philosophy of construction, one that valued longevity over initial cost, one that designed materials to work with their environment rather than resist it, one that accepted that great achievements require time, patience, and deep understanding of materials, one that built not for quarterly profits or election cycles, but for centuries. We live in a different world. Our economy works differently. Our needs are different. We can't simply copy Roman methods wholesale, but we can learn from their approach. We can ask ourselves why we accept infrastructure that fails within decades when we have evidence that centuries are possible. We can question the assumption that faster construction and lower initial cost always represent better value. We can consider the total life cycle cost and environmental impact of our choices. The concrete that built the Pantheon represents more than just a material. It represents a commitment to excellence, an understanding of craftsmanship, and a vision that extended beyond any individual lifetime. Roman engineers knew they were building for posterity. They knew their structures would outlast them. They built accordingly. In an age of planned obsolescence where products are designed to fail so they can be replaced, where short-term thinking dominates decision-making, the example of Roman concrete offers a counterpoint. It demonstrates that building for the long term is not just possible, but practical, that materials can be designed to last not years but millennia, that the knowledge required to achieve this is within human reach. After all, if people 2,000 years ago could figure this out, surely we can as well. The challenge isn't just technical, it's also philosophical and economic. We've built entire industries around the assumption that infrastructure needs constant replacement. Companies profit from demolition and reconstruction. Economic models calculate growth based on continuous building. Political careers are made on infrastructure projects that show results within election cycles. Changing this system requires more than just better concrete. It requires rethinking how we value durability, how we calculate costs, how we measure progress. But the environmental crisis gives us a compelling reason to make these changes. We cannot continue building disposable infrastructure. The planet cannot sustain it. The materials don't exist to support it. The energy requirements would be impossible to meet without carbon emissions that guarantee catastrophic climate change. We need buildings and bridges and roads that last, not just because it's impressive or economical, but because our survival depends on it. Roman concrete offers a path forward. Not the only path, certainly. Other solutions are being developed. But it's a proven path. We have 2,000 years of evidence that it works. We have structures still standing, still functional, still demonstrating their maker's genius. We're not pursuing an untested theory. We're recovering a demonstrated success. The work happening now in laboratories and research institutions around the world is not just academic, it's urgent. Every year that passes sees more infrastructure reach the end of its design life. Every decade brings new construction that will need replacement within our grandchildren's lifetimes. The sooner we can incorporate self-healing, long-lasting concrete into our building practices, the more we can reduce the total environmental impact of construction. Consider the scope of what the Romans built. The Pont du Gard aqueduct in southern France stands 160 feet high, spanning 902 feet across the Gardon River. Built in the 1st century AD without mortar, using precisely cut stones and Roman concrete, it carried water to the city of Nîmes. Today, nearly 2,000 years later, it's still standing. Tourists walk across its top tier. The structure has survived countless floods, including devastating ones in 1958 that destroyed modern bridges nearby. The Roman aqueduct barely noticed. The Aqua Claudia aqueduct in Rome, completed in 52 AD, stretched 43 miles from Mountain Springs to the city. Its arches, built with Roman concrete, still stand along parts of the route. Some sections remain so intact that they look like they could resume carrying water tomorrow if anyone bothered to reconnect them. This isn't preservation through careful maintenance. For centuries, these structures were abandoned, ignored, sometimes even vandalized for building materials. They survived not because anyone protected them, but because they were built to last. Roman harbours present an even more impressive demonstration. The ancient port at Caesarea in Israel, built by Herod the Great around 22 BC, was constructed using concrete poured directly into wooden forms submerged in seawater. This technique, called opus cementitium, created a massive harbour that served as a crucial Mediterranean trading hub. The harbour fell into disuse after the Roman period and was gradually buried under sediment. When modern archaeologists excavated it, they found the concrete foundations still structurally sound after spending 2 millennia underwater. Compare this to modern marine structures. The Galveston Sea Wall in Texas, built in the early 20th century to protect the city from hurricanes, requires constant maintenance and reinforcement. Concrete piers around the world show significant deterioration within 50 years of construction. Yet Roman maritime concrete, exposed to wave action, salt water, and biological growth for 20 times as long, remains substantially intact. What enabled this extraordinary durability in marine environments? Marie Jackson's research revealed the answer. Roman concrete doesn't just resist seawater, it actually uses seawater to strengthen itself. When salt water permeates the concrete, it triggers the formation of aluminum tobermorite crystals. These crystals grow in a distinctive pattern, creating long, interlocking plates that reinforce the material. The process is similar to how bones strengthen themselves through constant remodeling in response to stress. Modern marine concrete does the opposite. Seawater is its enemy. Salt ions penetrate the concrete and attack the steel reinforcement inside, causing it to rust and expand. This expansion creates internal pressure that cracks the concrete from the inside out. The cracks allow more seawater to enter, accelerating the corrosion. Within decades, the reinforcement has degraded so badly that the structure becomes unsafe. The Romans avoided this problem entirely by not using steel reinforcement. They didn't need it. Their engineering approach focused on keeping concrete in compression through clever structural design. Arches, domes, and massive walls all naturally resist compressive forces. As long as you design your structure properly, you can keep the concrete doing what it does best, resisting compression, and avoid asking it to do what it does poorly, which is resisting tension. This design philosophy extended to the details of construction. When building the Pantheon's dome, Roman engineers didn't just make it lighter toward the top by using lighter aggregate. They also created coffers, those square indentations you see in the dome's interior. These coffers aren't just decorative. They reduce weight while maintaining structural integrity. Each coffer is carefully designed to distribute stress. The pattern grows more complex toward the oculus, with smaller coffers providing additional strength exactly where the structure needs it most. The rotunda walls beneath the dome are equally sophisticated. They're not solid throughout. Hidden within those 20-foot thick walls are 8 massive chambers, connected by arches. These chambers serve multiple purposes. They reduce the total weight of the structure, which matters when you're building on the soft ground of Rome. They create distribution patterns for the dome's weight, channeling forces down to the foundation through specific load paths. And they may have provided acoustic properties that enhanced the temple's function as a public space. This attention to structural detail, this understanding of how forces flow through a building, this willingness to design for the specific properties of concrete rather than fighting against them, these represent a level of engineering sophistication that matches anything we do today. The Romans achieved it through empirical observation and practical experience rather than mathematical modelling, but the results speak for themselves. The question we must ask is, why did we abandon these principles? Why did we develop Portland cement, which requires more energy and produces weaker concrete, when the Romans had already solved the problem? The answer lies in the specific needs of the Industrial Revolution. Portland cement was developed in 1824 by Joseph Aspdin in Britain. It was standardized, predictable, and quick-setting. You could produce it anywhere that had limestone and clay. You didn't need volcanic ash. You didn't need to ship materials across long distances. And it hardened fast enough to support rapid construction. The 19th and 20th centuries valued speed and standardization above all else. Cities were growing explosively. Infrastructure needed to be built quickly. Steel-reinforced concrete allowed for tall buildings and long spans that would have been impossible with Roman methods. The combination of steel and concrete created the modern world. Skyscrapers, massive bridges, vast dams. But we're now seeing the long-term costs of that choice. We built rapidly, but not durably. We created infrastructure with a 50 to 100-year lifespan, meaning everything built in the mid-20th century is now reaching the end of its design life simultaneously. The bill for all that rapid construction is coming due, and it's measured in trillions of dollars and catastrophic carbon emissions. Roman concrete offers a different model. Not for everything. We're not going to build skyscrapers with unreinforced concrete domes, but for infrastructure meant to last, for structures that need to resist harsh environments, for applications where durability matters more than initial speed or cost. Roman-inspired concrete presents a compelling alternative. The research at MIT is exploring how to incorporate self-healing mechanisms into steel-reinforced concrete. The challenge is that steel and self-healing lime clasts don't play well together. The high pH environment created by the lime can accelerate steel corrosion. So researchers are investigating alternative reinforcement materials, modified lime compositions, and protective coatings that allow the self-healing mechanism to function without compromising the steel. Other teams are working on Roman-inspired concrete formulations that use modern materials. Coal fly ash can substitute for volcanic ash in many applications. Certain types of slag from steel production have similar reactive properties. Ground glass, silica fume, and other industrial byproducts can provide the necessary chemical reactivity. The goal is not to perfectly recreate Roman concrete, but to capture its beneficial properties using materials we can source today. The economics of this research are compelling. Even if Roman-inspired concrete costs 20% more to produce than standard concrete, if it lasts 3 times as long, it's dramatically cheaper over its lifetime. When you factor in reduced maintenance, less frequent replacement, and lower environmental impact, the economic case becomes overwhelming. For public infrastructure, bridges, dams, government buildings, where we're spending tax dollars and expecting structures to serve multiple generations, the long-term value proposition is obvious. Private developers are more challenging to convince. They typically don't own buildings for 200 years. They build, sell, and move on. Their incentive structure favors low initial cost over long-term durability. Changing this requires building codes that mandate certain performance standards, insurance requirements that account for expected lifespan, and possibly tax incentives for choosing more durable materials. Admir Masick, reflecting on his research, has said that he doesn't want to completely copy Roman concrete. We don't need to. What we need is to translate a few key sentences from their book of knowledge into our modern construction language. We need to understand the principles they discovered and adapt them to our context, our materials, our needs. We need to take what worked for them and make it work for us. That translation is happening now. Research papers are being published, patents are being filed, pilot projects are being tested. The concrete of the future may look different from Roman concrete, but it will incorporate their insights. It will heal its own cracks. It will interact beneficially with its environment. It will last not decades, but centuries. And when future generations stand before structures built with this new ancient knowledge, they might wonder how we did it. They might marvel at buildings that have stood for hundreds of years as without major repairs. They might study our materials and try to understand our techniques. And if they do, I hope they realize that we learned it from people who came before. That we read the lesson written in the dome of the Pantheon. That we recognize genius when we saw it, even though it was 2,000 years old. This is the story of Roman concrete, a material that has stood the test of time, a technology that has challenged our assumptions about progress, an achievement that reminds us that sometimes the way forward requires looking back, and a promise that with patience, observation, and respect for knowledge, human beings can create things that last not just for our lifetimes, but for millennia. The Pantheon's oculus still opens to the sky. Rain still falls through it occasionally. The ancient drainage still works. The concrete still stands. And we are finally learning to read what the Romans wrote in stone. Their message is simple but profound. Build things that last. Create materials that improve with age. Design for permanence. Think beyond your own lifetime. These principles, discovered through centuries of experimentation and perfected in structures like the Pantheon, are as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago, perhaps more so. We face challenges the Romans never imagined, but they left us tools to address those challenges. They showed us what's possible when human ingenuity is directed toward creating things that endure. The concrete beneath the Pantheon's dome is not just a building material, It's a testament to human capability, a demonstration that we can solve seemingly impossible problems, a reminder that great achievements require patience and wisdom, and a promise that when we build with care and understanding, when we learn from the past while embracing the future, when we commit to excellence and durability, we can create things that outlast empires, that endure through centuries, that inspire generations yet to come. That's the real secret of Roman concrete. Not just the chemistry of lime and volcanic ash, not just the technique of hot mixing, not just the self-healing mechanisms. The secret is ambition, tempered by humility. The secret is building for those who come after. The secret is understanding that true innovation sometimes means recovering wisdom we've lost. The secret is recognizing that 2,000 years ago, human beings figured out something remarkable. And if we pay attention, if we study carefully, if we apply their insights with our modern understanding, we can match their achievement and build a more sustainable future. The concrete has spoken. We're finally learning to listen. And what it tells us could change how we build the world.